This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, world stocks climbed to their highest in more than a week today as expectations of more central bank stimulus did help investors look past a mounting coronavirus death toll and, of course, its economic impact. Now, developing world markets also continued a recovery for the second straight session. Investors did take some comfort from China's efforts to limit the damage from that outbreak. MSCI's index for emerging market stocks was up 0.6% on the day. On the continent, South Africa's JSE also saw a second day of gains, up over 1%. Banks were up 1%, but platinum miners gave back about 0.91% today. In Nigeria, large cap Dangote Cement fell about 5%. It dragged the all-share index down. Oil firms Mobil and Con Oil also fell about 10% on the day. Now, also coming up on the show, Ghana raises $3 billion in a Eurobond auction that was oversubscribed 5 times. More countries impose travel restrictions due to the coronavirus outbreak. And a Nigerian mother invents a lightweight phototherapy crib to fight neonatal jaundice. Well, our starting point tonight is in Ghana. The government has accrued $3 billion after a Eurobond auction that was oversubscribed 5 times. Now, the sale included 7-year bonds at a coupon of 6.375%, 15-year bonds with a coupon of 7.875%, and 41-year paper with a coupon of 8.875%. The 41-year-old Eurobond is the longest dated bond ever issued by a sub-Saharan African government. Huge investor interest was triggered by the strong economic fundamentals coupled with Moody's favorable ratings. The International Monetary Fund recently gave a positive assessment of the Ghanaian economy following the conclusion of a 3-year lending program. Well, let's get all the details on this from CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai. He joins us now in Accra. Nabil, always great to have you on the show. Now, it is expected that these funds will be channeled towards ongoing reforms in the country, especially as Ghana prepares for presidential election in the 4th quarter of this year. So, Nabil, what do you know so far about how exactly the government plans to use these funds?
Uche, we know that the government plans to finance its budget deficits with this Eurobond. Indeed, during the 2020 budget reading in Parliament last year, the finance minister pointed out that $2 billion was going to be used for that purpose. Aside that, we know that the country hopes to use this Eurobond to meet its infrastructure needs. Ghana always needs about $10 billion every year to bridge its infrastructure gap, and we know that part of the government's efforts this year is targeting infrastructure. Indeed, the government has declared this year the year of roads, meaning that a lot of money is going to be channeled into the construction of roads across the 16 regions of the country in order to meet the infrastructure deficit. And also, we know that the Eurobond is going to help the country service its debts. And lastly, the country last year struggled with its local currency, the cedi. It kept depreciating against the US dollar and the British pound. We know that this Eurobond is going to help the country give the central bank with some reserves to shore up the strengthening of the cedi against the US dollar. This year in January, we've seen the cedi appreciate marginally against the US dollar and also the British pound. We know the government is planning to consolidate this growth of stabilizing the cedi against the US dollar and the British pound. So this Eurobond is also going to be channeled towards that cause in the central bank, Uche.
Well, Nabil, there are also concerns about Ghana's debt sustainability and, of course, the high risk it faces of debt distress. We do know that government debt surged in 2018. Total debt was almost 40 billion US dollars, putting the country's debt to GDP ratio at about 60%. So how is the country handling its debt servicing costs?
So the government has what it calls the debt management strategy, where it wants to really service its debts by looking into domestic securities, preferably going into long-term bonds. We know that this Eurobond that has been secured has 41 years, which is the longest any African country has ever received, and this is part of the debt management strategy that the government has in place. Aside that, the government is also looking at domestic local investors actually to implement its financial strategy by boosting the country's economy, and also it believes that doing this would help service its debts. Uche.
Well, Nabil, last year the state did struggle to plug a budget gap. It was higher than projected, and analysts are already predicting and sounding the alarm that the government will miss its fiscal deficit targets this year, of course, unless there's some more revenue growth. What is the pace of revenue growth in the country right now?
For now, we can say that the pace of revenue growth is quite steady. Early this year, the Ghana Revenue Authority came out to announce that it exceeded its 2019 target of raising $8 billion. And indeed, this is something that the government was very, very happy about, that the target it gave the Ghana Revenue Authority has been slightly exceeded. And in the 2020 budget, the government outlined some robust tax generation regime that is going to implement it this year to be able to generate a lot of revenue for the country. So for now, we can say that the country is on course in raising some revenue for the country to meet its budget. Uche.
Now, when the state ended a 4-year extended credit facility program with the IMF last year, it did pledge to maintain its fiscal discipline going forward. What has been this particular government's track record in this area so far?
Uche, in terms of the track record, we can say that, let's look at 2019. The government had a target of its fiscal deficit of 4.2%, but then during the course of 2019, it had to revise it and bring it to 4.5%. At the end of 2019, the government was able to meet that target of 4.5%. Now, we know that in 2018, the government decided to institute what it calls a Fiscal Responsibility Act, which is targeting limiting fiscal spending by 5% of GDP, and it was able to achieve that below 5% in 2019, which was 4.5%. Aside that, this year is actually targeting limiting its fiscal deficit to 4.7%. But some analysts are saying that that may not be feasible, and they are predicting 4.9% for the country. But then we can say that this year is actually an election year, and there is always overspending during election year, and the government is looking to limit its spending this year, hence giving the target of 4.7%. But with analysts saying that it may not be able to achieve that and it will go to 4.9%, we know there's going to be some challenge. But then when you compare this election year to the election year 2016, the particular year ended with 7.3% fiscal deficit. So government's track record seems to be quite good in terms of maintaining its fiscal discipline to 5% according to the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Uche.
Quite right. Well, many thanks, Nabil, for your insights there. That was Nabil Ahmed Rufai joining us there in Accra. Now, the International Monetary Fund is applauding 6 East African states for transparency in the management of their financial resources. This was revealed during the launch of new statistics guidelines, which are believed to be key in data collection ahead of the planned East African Monetary Union. CGTN's Daniel Kijo with more.
The IMF says it is impressed by the recent improvements seen among the 6 East African countries which make up the East African Community Bloc. The East African coordinator Harvey Joey was launching new guidelines at the EAC headquarters in Arusha that will lay the foundation on how financial data is collected among the member states. He says revenue collection in the East African bloc has also improved. He says this will benefit the 500 million East Africans. The IMF has vowed to continue to support the region in attaining the East African Community Monetary Union. The EAC Monetary Union target has been set for a deadline of 2024 after the protocol for the establishment of the union was signed 7 years ago in 2013. Under the agreement, EAC states agreed to form key institutions and maintain a set of 4 criteria for at least 3 years before the monetary union. The 4 organizations are the East African Monetary Union, the East African Statistics Bureau, and the East African Surveillance, Compliance and Enforcement Commission, as well as the East African Financial Services Commission. In heading towards a single currency plan, the EAC aims to harmonize monetary and fiscal policies. It also aims to link financial payment and settlement systems, unify policies and standards on statistical information, as well as the establishment of an East African Central Bank. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And now let's take a look at our corporate headlines today. Qatar Airways is in talks to buy a 49% stake in Rwanda's state carrier. The move comes barely 2 months after the Gulf airline agreed to take a 60% stake in a new airport in the East African economy. Now, since its establishment in 2003, Rwanda Air has slowly risen to become one of the key airlines in Africa. In 2018, it was named amongst the most improved airlines in the world. And the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa say a local unit of Japanese car manufacturer Toyota has reinstated thousands of members which it fired. The workers were dismissed for embarking on an unprotected strike over an incentive bonus. The deal comes barely days after Toyota SA announced a $272 million investment in local vehicle assembly and parts supply. And still in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa is open to a proposal by the country's largest trade union to lower the debt of struggling state power utility Eskom. Now, COSATU wants state-owned asset manager PIC and local development finance groups to invest roughly $17 billion in the utility. But Ramaphosa says any steps taken on Eskom's debt should not undermine the investment mandates of the PIC or other affected institutions. And finally, German industrial giant Siemens has reported a 3% net profit fall in its fiscal first quarter. The company attributes the decline to weakness in the auto and energy sectors. At the moment, Siemens plans to carve out its gas and power division. Siemens Energy will be listed on the German stock exchange in September. It is expected to be at the center of the global debate on climate change. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's take a quick break now. Still coming up. Nigeria unveils new visa laws to boost business and tourism. And Kenya's Africa Star Railway operation shows support for China as it battles with the coronavirus outbreak.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction action on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sani. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has met with US President Donald Trump in Washington. Kenya is working closely with the US government in crafting a free trade agreement. If successful, the deal will make Kenya the only country in sub-Saharan Africa to have reached such a pact with the world's biggest economy. Well, Giles Gibson now joins us live from Washington with more on those negotiations. Giles, great to have you on the show. Now, what do we know so far about those possible negotiations on a free trade agreement?
Well, President Kenyatta was being very tight-lipped about possible trade negotiations between Kenya and the United States when he gave a speech at a think tank here in Washington ahead of his meeting with President Trump on Thursday. But he did hint that negotiations could be starting very soon. Take a listen.
I am greatly looking forward to making early and an ambitious start to arrangements for the foreseen end of the AGOA program in the year 2025.
Now, he was also asked during a panel discussion at this event about trade negotiations between the US and Kenya. Again, he simply laughed it off and refused to comment on it. I think we'll get much more concrete details about these trade negotiations when he goes to the White House for his meeting with President Trump on Thursday.
Well, in the meantime, Giles, we did hear the president mention that AGOA is set to run till 2025. How could these discussions possibly impact a new agreement going forward? How could it impact AGOA, the AGOA agreement going forward?
Well, to give it its full title, it's the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. Now, it's been in place since 2000, and what it allows is sub-Saharan countries in Africa to export to the United States without tariffs or quotas. Now, as we know, President Trump much prefers bilateral trade deals between the US and one other country, as opposed to these big multilateral pacts like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, which of course President Trump has pulled his country out of. I think what's crucial here is that the United States are reportedly seeing Kenya as really the country that they can do a bilateral trade deal with that will then allow that to be really just an example, a model for all sorts of other bilateral trade deals that they want to do with these countries in Africa once AGOA expires, or as it expires over the next few years.
Now, of course, they'll be discussing several partnerships in other sectors, including security. How important is the US-Kenya partnership, especially in the fight against Al-Shabaab?
Well, what we saw in this speech from President Kenyatta was that he talked about, for example, that there was his last time in Washington back in 2018 when he came to the White House. That's when the US and Kenya announced that they were going to be upgrading their bilateral ties to a strategic partnership. Now, he said one of the most important parts of that partnership is fighting against Al-Shabaab. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We must continue to work together as Kenya and the United States, together with other regional players, to surge our military efforts against the group, to offer room for a workable political consensus in Somalia.
Now, one of his other key messages in this speech was that if you manage to reduce youth unemployment, if you give young people who are looking for work, if you give them a sense of purpose and a job, then that can be really a long-term tool to try and fight extremism in Kenya and in all sorts of other countries across the region.
Well, many thanks for that update, Giles. We know you'll be standing by with more updates tomorrow. That, of course, was Giles Gibson joining us there in Washington. Well, let's move on now to Nigeria. Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has officially unveiled a new visa policy for the country. Under the new policy, the categories of Nigerian visas have been expanded from 6 to 79 classes. That includes a visa on arrival for citizens of all African Union countries. Nigeria is hoping to use the new visa policy to boost business and tourism in the country. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more on that story.
The new visa policy is sequel to President Buhari's pronouncement last year that visa on arrival would be granted to all African travelers starting from January 2020. The president has now followed through on that commitment by unveiling the Nigeria Visa Policy 2020, saying the initiative is all designed to enhance business opportunities and achieve African integration.
This is an important policy document which seeks to complement our efforts towards protecting our national identity and the defense of our sovereignty and territorial integrity. This Nigeria Visa Policy 2020 provides an avenue to achieve African integration by the introduction of visas on arrival for short visits to Nigeria for holders of passports of African Union countries. I therefore commend the document to the international community, foreign and local business entities. We are open for business.
The new visa policy has 79 classes of visas broadly divided into 3 categories: visitors, temporary residents, and permanent residents.
There is a visa for emergency relief on arrival. We are not praying. If there is a disaster, we can allow somebody to come quickly and pick a visa. That shows that there will be no bureaucracy on issues. We have visa for pre-transit visa for Nigerian carriers. There is a visa which allows people to come and collect visa at the point of entry if they are purchasing Nigerian product. We have visas that linked our relationship with our citizens. So these visas categories have been created in order to soften the system. Also student visas, which we don't have before you give them business. We want people to come and study in this country with the time going. Even we have medical. People are saying that we are doing a lot of medical tourism. Yes, but you'll be surprised. Some of our neighbors are coming, and some people will come for medicine.
There had been public concerns when the president mooted the idea last year that the visa on arrival policy for all Africans especially could pose a huge security risk for Nigeria. But that fear has now been dispelled.
Whoever visits Nigeria will have his biometric taken. We will upgrade that to even iris, but it's still at ordinary thumb impressions. All your fingers will be taken. And immediately that is done with what he told you about of eye 24/7, Interpol 24/7. You are immediately exposed to the database of Interpol, and everything about you, if you have a criminal record, universally, is exposed. So there is no way the Nigerian security can be compromised.
With Nigeria signing up to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area last year, the new visa policy will give a further impetus to that agreement and demonstrate that the country is actually committed to the spirits of the AFCTA. The government, on its part, is hoping the policy could possibly open a floodgate of foreign investments, which the country badly needs. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, the US and Nigeria have reached an agreement to repatriate around $308 million seized from Nigeria's former military ruler, Sani Abacha. The deal is backed by the island of Jersey. US prosecutors say the sum is the latest to be recovered from the accounts of Abacha. The Nigerian government pegged the total amount at about $321 million. The funds were laundered through the U.S. banking system and then held in a bank account in Jersey. Sani Abacha ruled Nigeria from 1993 until his death in 1998. Companies linked to the Abacha family have gone to court to prevent the repatriation. They claim the process is an infringement of their rights to a fair trial. Well, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also expressed hope that the United States will be able to lift visa restrictions that were slapped on Nigeria last week.
I'm announcing today that the United States and Nigeria have signed an agreement to return to the Nigerian people more than $308 million in assets stolen by a former dictator.
We've identified all those requirements, and we had actually started working on all of them. And and we know, and the U.S. Officials have also confirmed that we have been able to tick most of those boxes. Hopefully, once that has been achieved, we look forward to being taken off this visa restriction list.
And moving on now, as scientists intensify the fight against the coronavirus, in Kenya, a group of employees have come together to make donations to boost the fight. Kenyan staff at the Africa Star Railway operation are raising funds in solidarity with their Chinese colleagues. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa was there and filed this report.
A steady stream of employees wound their way toward the donation box at the center of the lobby area. The white envelopes held their donations. In their own little way, these employees of the Africa Star Railway Operation Company in Nairobi were supporting the fight against the coronavirus. The first cases of the new coronavirus were reported in China late in 2019. As the cases increased, AfriStar employees in Nairobi decided to chip in support of their Chinese colleagues.
We are basically family when we work with them, and when family is in need, we jump up to help.
Since the outbreak, our staff has been very concerned and have been thinking about how to help. We are focusing on ensuring our operations continue and ensuring the safety of our operations. We are grateful for the Kenyan donations, which show that we are one integrated family.
Staff members who recently visited China and toured the affected Wuhan region remembered their time there.
It hurts my heart because when I was in Wuhan, I felt comfortable. I felt as if I was home, away from home. So I felt bad to realize that the people I interacted with are under this risk of contracting this virus.
Like, for example, last year, the Ministry of Business sponsored a training that has trained over 50 staff from here to go to China. And one of the places we went was Wuhan to train about railway operation and management. So we really feel obliged to give back as a sign of kindness and a sign of appreciation.
Employees gave cash donations which will be sent to the Red Cross and other organizations to boost the fight against the disease. Though the virus has not spread to Kenya, the company has already taken precautions to safeguard the 4,000 passengers it transports daily.
We have also requested our staff and given them advice on ways to keep away and to ensure that they do not get the coronavirus. And we are also doing this to the passengers that we are carrying in the trains to ensure that we are safe all along.
As scientists continue to work to contain the virus and to find a vaccine and a cure, the donation box remains in the lobby. Every donation counts. Through their donations, members of staff of the Afrista Railway Operation Company are sending a message of support to those fighting the coronavirus and hoping that their donations will make a great difference in this fight. Wilkis Anyabwa, CGTN in Syokimau, Kenya.
Now, Somalia has also expressed solidarity with China as it battles the coronavirus epidemic. Health officials in the country say they have placed all ports of entry on high alert to contain the spread of the virus. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello has the story now from Mogadishu.
A heightened response has been put in place at Mogadishu's Aden Abdullah, the biggest airport in Somalia, over the coronavirus concerns. Health officials say the measure has been enforced at all ports of entry, with passengers subjected to screening before being allowed to enter the country.
We are jointly working on monitoring and identifying any potential threats with the relevant ministries of health, civil aviation, as well as our immigration department. We have increased and continue to increase the capacity of our health officials at all ports of entry.
The Somali government says its focus is international airlines coming in from several Middle Eastern and African countries. Airports under regional administrations have also been urged to create emergency response centers to report any suspected cases.
We have increased alert at all major ports of entry. Our security forces, immigration officials and airport management. We will enact a series of procedures that must be followed by all airlines and passengers to contain the ongoing threat.
Somalia has not recorded any cases so far, but vows to ensure that all incoming flights are properly checked to prevent individuals carrying the virus from entering the country. Meanwhile, the Somali mission in China says that all 50 Somali citizens residing in Wuhan, the epicenter of the virus, are all in good condition, with none of them affected by the coronavirus. On Monday, Somalia's Foreign Affairs Minister Ahmed Isa Awad hosted the Chinese ambassador to Somalia, Xinjiang, at his residence. Awad also assured the ambassador of his country's solidarity with China as it confronts the coronavirus. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break. Still coming up. More countries impose travel restrictions due to the coronavirus outbreak. And the UK's Boris Johnson vows to ban new gas and diesel cars by 2035.
No one again began holding guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives, News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in. Business in Africa is high risk. After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN. Well, here's a quick recap of today's top headlines. Chinese officials say they've updated a diagnosis and treatment plan for the coronavirus. It is based on a combination of traditional Chinese medicine and Western drugs in order to reduce mortality rates. Now, authorities add that most of the asymptomatic cases so far are people who have had a close contact with confirmed cases. And the World Health Organization has reported that over 1 million new cases of cancer occur in Africa annually. Out of 52 countries on the continent, Nigeria alone accounts for 10%, reporting 100,000 new cases out of an estimated 1 million. Now, experts are now urging the government and the private bodies to put in more effort to try and improve diagnosis and treatment of the disease. And Burkina Faso is grappling with a humanitarian crisis on an unprecedented scale. It is also facing military insurgents, which has resulted in the displacement of close to 700,000 people. Now, the deteriorating security situation is making life especially difficult for the more than 25,000 Malian refugees in the country. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Now, as the number of confirmed coronavirus cases continues to rise globally, an increasing number of countries are imposing travel restrictions and other measures to combat contagion. Let's get a closer look at the international situation now.
The United States has led a growing list of countries to put temporary but sweeping travel restrictions on Chinese nationals or those who have travelled to China in the last 2 weeks. On Tuesday, China's foreign ministry said it had noted how the US repeatedly expressed a readiness to offer China assistance and hoped this could materialize as soon as possible. Meanwhile, with reports of many Asians being mistreated around the world over the outbreak, Canada's Prime Minister said his country would not tolerate such behavior.
Let me be clear. There is no place in our country for discrimination driven by fear or misinformation. This is not something Canadians will ever stand for.
Japan, Germany, the UK and other nations have advised their citizens not to travel to China. And countries including Vietnam, Russia, Mongolia, Israel and Australia have announced various travel restrictions for Chinese nationals. In Brisbane, Australia, China's visiting women's soccer team was placed in quarantine ahead of an Olympic qualifying tournament. The squad had to train in the hallway of their hotel. At the same time, many national leaders have praised China's actions to contain the spread of the disease.
Actually, China is currently doing its level best. It has spared no efforts in containing the spread of the disease. The country has cancelled all group tours abroad and arranged chartered planes to bring back Hubei travelers from overseas. So China is a responsible country. It's our wish that China will succeed in containing the disease and win this battle. We are confident that China and the rest of the world will overcome the challenge.
The World Health Organization declared the outbreak a global emergency on Thursday, but it also warns that closing borders was probably ineffective in halting transmission and could actually accelerate contagion. Many overseas Chinese nationals say they've encountered racism over the past few days, with many also saying they encountered practical difficulties on their travels.
Now, Australia is the world's largest exporter of coal. The commodity has helped fuel its economy for decades. But Australia's devastating bushfires and impacts from climate change have renewed the debate over the country's complex relationship with coal and its future. CGTN's Greg Navarro explains.
Australia has enjoyed nearly 3 decades of uninterrupted economic growth, thanks in large part to the minerals it extracts and exports. Its #1 exported mineral is iron ore. Right behind that is coal.
The one you refer to is worth about $70 billion in Australia, and this is important to so many communities across the country.
Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has been consistent in his support of coal. That includes while serving as the country's treasurer in 2017.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
That support and the Labor Party's plan to move away from fossil fuels helped Morrison win key electorates in last year's federal election.
If you were running for Prime Minister tomorrow, there's no way that you could completely disavow coal. And that's because so many of the seats for Australia's parliaments, both at a federal and state level, involve the representation of regional people. And those regional people, in many of the states, rely upon coal as part of their economic mix.
But the country's unprecedented bushfire season has focused a spotlight on climate change and Australia's relationship with coal. Early in the country's bushfire season, Scott Morrison said there was no scientific evidence to suggest that Australia's carbon emissions, at just 1.3% of the global emissions, had any direct impact on any specific fire events. Scientists say that number doesn't take into account the amount of fossil fuels that Australia exports, including coal.
What we find is that more than 3 times the amount of CO2 is emitted in the Asia-Pacific region compared to Australia's domestic emissions. So this is an enormous contribution in consequential emissions to the overall global emissions profile.
While the current political climate may not favour a move away from fossil fuels today, University of Technology's Sydney Associate Professor Bly Grant believes such a move could gain traction in just a few years.
I think that a sensible policy and rhetorical platform can be built around the idea that we are transitioning from coal and from fossil fuels more generally.
The question, he says, is which politician, which political party is willing to come up with a plan that is believable, sustainable and saleable to the greater Australian public. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson kicked off what he calls a year of climate action on Tuesday. That's hours after a former UN leader scolded Johnson for not understanding the crisis. CGTN's Andrew Wilson with more.
With the protesters outside, the UK's plans for COP26 in November were officially launched by the Prime Minister.
For every country to announce credible targets to get there. That's what we want from Glasgow. And that's why we are pledged here in the UK to deliver net zero by 2050.
The headline pledge was to phase out new petrol and diesel cars by 2035 instead of 2040, a gesture of urgency reiterated by guest of honour Sir David Attenborough.
And it is now up to us to put before the nations of the world what has to be done. We don't need to emphasize to them or to you that the longer we leave it and not doing things but going on talking about the problems, the worse it's going to get.
But as fossil fuel emissions continue to rise, there are concerns the government has left this too late. November isn't far away, and Johnson has just sacked his conference chair, Claire O'Neill, who in response said the PM doesn't really get climate change. 2035 is a good headline, but environmentalists say it's too late, and the motor industry says it's too soon. And bear in mind that countries planning to phase out diesel and petrol cars by 2030 include Iceland, Ireland, Israel, and the Netherlands. Environmentalists also doubt the credentials of the leadership on offer to steer the crucial UN talks, but hope that people power will motivate the international community this time.
What we've seen happen over the last couple of years is the penny collectively drop on climate change. People are realising just the gravity of the situation that we're in, just how much danger we're in, and the scale of the challenge that we face in actually rising to stop this crisis turning into a catastrophe.
COP26 is a potential showcase for post-Brexit UK, but it's also acknowledged as something of a last chance for us all. Andrew Wilson, CGTN, London.
Now, artificial intelligence is everywhere, but these days AI is increasingly fusing creativity with science. CGTN's Juliet Mann took a trip to the AI More Than Human exhibition in London to find out how AI is revolutionizing art.
This robot is able to teach itself by interacting with its surroundings. Alta 3 has even conducted operas in Japan and Germany. The team behind the creation say it's a neat fusion of art and science.
He's half completed. We need a human input to make him a better artist and a better conductor. It's always we need a human as a part of the algorithm.
AI More Than Human is a London exhibition which looks at the creative and scientific developments in artificial intelligence and gives us a glimpse of what the future may hold. A future that could include computers that think and make art all by themselves. These one-of-a-kind tulips change appearance depending on the price of Bitcoin. Artist Anna Riddler can predict but not control which frames will be generated. Back in her studio, she says AI has allowed her to work in new ways.
There shouldn't be this distinction between AI art and human art, because for me, I think there still is a huge amount of humanness in making art with AI. So I consider myself to be the artist in the work, because I'm the one who's coming up with the idea and making the decision, doing all of the different elements of it.
She sees her role as an artist being enhanced rather than endangered by the possibilities of AI.
I had to spend a year, almost full time, trying to teach a machine what a tulip is. So killer robots aren't quite there just yet.
What AI has in store might seem like the stuff of science fiction, but machine learning is already being used now.
The intervention of technology and the changes to the workplace has been happening for centuries. This new development in technology will allow us to think creatively about how we work. We're all going to have to be evolving our skills, as we always have. I don't think any of us can assume that we have one set of skills for life, and this is what AI is showing us. It's another process of evolution.
These gadgets and gizmos are fascinating AI novelties, but frequently AI is hidden in our day-to-day lives.
This installation mimics movement. That is the future me. But today, artificial intelligence isn't just big and bold. It's all around us, shaping the way we live and work. Juliet Mann, CGTN, London.
Now, one could be forgiven for thinking that a robot's favorite music would be heavy metal. Well, based on the creation of one Japanese composer, it might in fact be opera. A performance called Scary Beauty has been taking place in the UAE, and as CGTN's Jacob Greaves reports, its main attraction is an android.
Meet the metal and mechanics behind the UAE's latest maestro. The musicians at this opera might be human, but the conductor is an android.
The
premise is that the android itself is moving according to its own will. As a separate program,
The structural elements of the score which Mr. Shibuya has created is inserted into independent and autonomous actions. The android reinterprets this score and incorporates it into its actions.
It's fair to say this isn't your standard night out at the opera. It's the brainchild of Japanese composer Koichiro Shibuya. His team call the android's antics artificial life rather than artificial intelligence. That translates to a computerized system simulating the characteristics of a musical maestro.
Whilst a vocalist and conductor of this nature might be a bit of a novel spectacle, it also raises the question of what role AI and robotics might have in the art world.
I think that robots and AI have become too trendy. It's like everything has to do with robots or AI. But the important thing is, even if you use robots or AI, is the creation going to have strength as art? The robots and AI that exist now are not at all complete. The focus of my interest at this moment is what happens when this incomplete technology comes together with art.
Gimmick or great idea, that might depend on your musical taste. But it is another example of the growing role that AI and robotics have in our daily lives. As tech takes pride of place everywhere from the factory floor to the boardroom, economists are increasingly asking what impact it will have on the jobs and livelihoods of people. It's a point I put to the Sharjah Art Foundation, who decided to stage this show.
I think artists themselves will really be irreplaceable. You could have technicians, in fact a lot of artists today have workshops. The people who produce the work that they are, Damien Hirst spot painting is not painted by Damien Hirst. I don't think robotics will replace artists, but I think you will probably see more artists working with new technologies in ways that we can't even imagine right now.
Machines making their mark in culture might become more commonplace, but it seems unlikely to be the swan song for human artists. Jacob Greaves with CGTN in Sharjah.
Well, let's shift focus now. Take a look at how commodities performed today. Today saw gold prices slipping slightly to their lowest in 2 weeks, and then steadying on news of a drug to treat coronavirus. Now, reports of drug breakthroughs did lift European shares, and that dented some of bullion's safe haven appeal. News of coronavirus drug, on the other hand, did inject life into oil prices today. They jumped by more than 3%. Well, let's head into a quick break now. Do stay with us. We'll be right back.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys. The greatest sights. The greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, in Nigeria, a mother has made it her life's mission to tackle neonatal jaundice. Virtue Oboro invented Nigeria's first lightweight phototherapy crib using LED lights. Let's take a look.
My name is Virtue Oboro. I am the founder of Tiny Hearts Technology and the...
Virtue Oboro watched her baby suffer for hours from jaundice in the hospital. The ordeal inspired her to start her business, Tiny Hearts Technology. She provides lightweight therapy units fitted with LED lighting to hospitals in Nigeria.
The light is actually what makes the crib a phototherapy unit.
Her son Tomra was born in 2015 with jaundice, a potentially fatal condition. It's caused when the liver is too slow to clear bilirubin. High-intensity light is used to break down the compound. But at the hospital in the southern town of Yenagoa, none of the phototherapy units were available. When her son was finally placed in one, he was burned by the fluorescent lighting. So she created Crib Aglow, using cooler LED lights, which prevent babies from getting burned or dehydrated.
The perception that a lot of doctors and nurses and medical experts had was, this is not good. It didn't come from one of us. You have to be an expert in this field to come up with something like this. But fortunately for us, we had a strong team that helped put this together.
Today, the cribs have, according to Oboro, found their way to 70 hospitals around Nigeria and Ghana.
It's very, very convenient. It is very mobile. You can move around, and I think it's also very simple to use.
The first month of a child's life is considered to carry the highest risk of death, and Nigeria has the second highest rate of neonatal deaths in the world.
Well, before we go, a quick look at Africa's currencies today. Kenya's shilling strengthened. Inflows from remittances and offshore investors, who of course are buying government debt, did surpass today's dollar demand from importers. Meanwhile, South Africa's rand continues to benefit from an improved mood on global markets. But of course, sentiment still remains shaky due to local factors surrounding its economy. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send us your feedback to the contacts on the screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.